Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. Call now with your question for today's guest. Toll free 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
Hello, very happy Friday to you, Friday of Easter week. I hope your Easter continues as a blessed week, and don't forget the great feast of Divine Mercy celebrated this Sunday. So the joy continues. The joy of Easter continues. Hope it's continuing where you are. This hour, we're going to discuss the papacy. We're going to discuss, the Bible blueprint for the papacy. A perfect hour for anybody who doesn't think Peter was the first pope and would like to maybe challenge us a little bit on the biblical evidence. Or maybe you do think Peter was the first pope, but you're dialoguing with someone else, maybe a Protestant who you need some biblical support to help that conversation along. Anybody who thinks there's a passage in the Bible that undermines our understanding of the papacy is welcome to call as well. 888-318-7884. The number 888-318-7884. Our guest this hour always brings us up on a Friday. It's Carlo Broussard. Carlo is staff apologist here at Catholic Answers, renowned public speaker, and he's also got that brand new book coming out this month, Prepare the Way, How to Overcome Obstacles to God, the Gospel, and the Church. And I believe the book is also infallible. Is that correct?
No, it is not.
Oh, it's not infallible. Okay, all right. So, but it's as close as you can. No?
There's no, I haven't found any error in it. Maybe a typo here or there we might find.
Okay.
Right? I think I actually just found one today when I was combing through it. I found a little typo there. But yeah, so I'm excited about the book. And it addresses some very pertinent questions, especially, within the recent media with the alleged topic of, with the alleged comments from Pope Francis concerning the doctrine of hell, right?
Yeah.
And that sort of signaled that the doctrine of hell is a very important topic on the hearts of many people. I wrote a piece, I sort of gave a little sneak peek of one of my chapters on hell, where I give some strategies on how to remove the obstacle for folks who can't seem to reconcile the doctrine of hell and an all-good God. And so I gave a little sneak piece and sort of adapted a portion of that chapter for Catholic Answers Magazine online, the Camo piece, and we got really good traffic on that article, which tells me that the doctrine of hell is something that people think about a lot. They have a lot of questions about it, and especially, with the situation with the alleged comments of Pope Francis denying hell, which the Vatican said it was not faithful to the interview, right? And that it was, that Pope Francis didn't say that. But even though he didn't say that, what it does show is sort of the flames that it generated, to use the image there, the flames that it generated within the hearts of people. People got really riled up about it, right?
Yeah, right.
And so that's one of the issues that I address in my book, which is sort of a subcategory of the overall theme of the problem of evil and stuff. And that's sort of a big portion of the book. I devote 3 chapters specifically to the problem of evil, as well as a chapter to the problem of divine hiddenness, and then you can throw in hell in there. So I address important issues like that concerning truth and God and Jesus and Christianity and the church, and offering the reader strategies on how to remove some of the obstacles that keep people from acknowledging truth, God, Jesus, Christianity, and particularly the Catholic Church. And it's directed toward Catholics in particular, but actually 4 out of the 5 sections can benefit all Christians of all denominations, because 4 out of the 5 sections go beyond and transcend the visible boundaries of Christian denominations. But it's sort of a teaching manual, a coaching manual with strategies, questions to ask in order to guide along the dialogue, in order to remove these obstacles for unbelievers and for skeptics. So I'm really excited about it, Cy.
We all are. Everybody around here is excited to see it.
It's going to be coming out at the end of this month. And our folks listening can actually pre-order at shop.catholic.com.
And Carlo, it seems to me that like the Christian message that God loves you so much, He died for you. He left a church to help you through this life, and He intends for you to rise with Him. That's such good news that it really is for many people. They would love that to be true. They need to get over the obstacles to accepting this. In some ways, I think it almost seems too good to be true to people.
Amen. Well, the truth of Jesus' resurrection, which is what we're celebrating now in this Easter of season, presupposes the truth about whether or not we can trust these ancient documents that tell us Jesus rose from the dead. So how can I make an act of faith in Jesus and give my life over to Him because He rose from the dead and He's gone if I can't first trust these ancient sources from which I'm deriving the data about what Jesus said and did and rising from the dead, etc. So we need to address, some people, they need that historical evidence first in order to give them good reason, to give them a foundation of reason in order to make the act of faith in responding to the invitation of Jesus Christ to enter into an intimate relationship with Him in order to attain the reward that He promises for us, namely heaven, which involves that glorified bodily resurrection.
Amen, Carlo. Yeah, and so and also the liberty, the freedom, the joy that comes with that in this life.
And that's something I point out also in the book as well, Cy. There's a chapter in there where I deal with the common obstacle of hypocrites among Christians, right? Those who claim to be Christian, they pretend to be Christian, but yet they're not, And one of the points I make in there is that what people are really looking for when they make that charge is there any evidence that the Christian message is not just informative, but actually transformative?
Yeah, there you go.
And that Christianity can actually change my life for the good. And so I address that in the book and answer, of course, that question in the affirmative and say, yes, there is evidence of that, which, it doesn't prove Christianity to be true, but it is sort of the icing on the cake, so to speak.
Right. So this hour, we're looking for the Bible blueprint for the papacy. Is it in there? This thing that we believe about the Pope, is it in there? And it's very powerful, the evidence, but yet some people seem to kind of, I don't know, well, let's say the majority of people on earth have yet to be convinced by that evidence. So obviously it's not as powerful as it seems to me. So is there evidence in the scripture that Jesus Himself gives Peter authority? Says, you have it, him in particular.
Correct.
Not the apostles, not all the disciples, but Peter.
Yeah, so we have evidence that Jesus does give the 12 apostles authority to exercise within the first century community of Christians. But what we see and what we find in the New Testament is that Jesus gives Peter a very unique and, I would argue, a supreme authority over and above the College of the 12, constituting Peter as a visible source of unity. Pete got the seat, so to speak, right?
I never heard that.
Pete
got the seat.
I got to say, I robbed that. I stole that from Dr. Ray Garendi.
Oh, Dr. Ray.
That's not original for me, man. So, but
he probably forgot he said it. I don't think you have to give him credit.
This was a long time ago at a conference.
He's not going to recognize that.
But Peter is the leader. And of course, the classic texts for this claim is Matthew 16, 18 through 19, where Jesus changes Simon's name to Peter, which in Greek is Petros, which means rock, promises to build his church upon Peter, the metaphorical rock, promises that the gates of hell would not prevail against this church. He gives Peter the keys of the kingdom of heaven, which he does so exclusively. Jesus does not give the keys of the kingdom to any of the other apostles in a direct way. He gives it exclusively to Peter there in Matthew 16, verse 19, and then gives him a supreme authority to bind and loose because it's an exclusive address. Jesus does give the other apostles the authority to bind and loose in Matthew 18:18, but he does so exclusively within the context of the keys in Matthew 16:19. And then, of course, there's Luke 22:29 through 32, where Jesus makes a unique promise to protect Peter from the sifting of Satan and gives him a command to strengthen the brethren. And then the other classic text is John 21:15-17, where Jesus gives Peter the threefold command to feed his sheep, shepherd his sheep, feed his lambs, shepherd his sheep, and feed his sheep. And that's a very profound passage as well, because we can
Yes.
talk about it throughout the show today, but there are certain clues in there that lead us to conclude that Jesus is making Peter the universal shepherd
Yeah.
of God's flock on this earth. So those are the three classic texts that we look to, and of course we need to unpack that, and look at it in detail. But those are the three classic texts that we refer to as Catholics in order to show the historical evidence that Jesus made Peter the leader of his first century
You got
church.
all the rhymes today.
And for the church as a whole, for all generations, because Peter would be succeeded by other men in the see of the Bishop of Rome.
888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. We're talking about the Bible blueprint for the papacy. Is it there in the Bible? What this institution we still recognize after 2,000 years. Again, 888-31-TRUTH, the number. Carlo Broussard, our guest. Before we go to break, Carlo, I'll just tell you one of my favorite things about that in John's Gospel, where Jesus he takes Peter off for a walk by himself, and I love the part where following behind them is the beloved disciple, because this because they turn around and Peter says to Jesus, "What about him?
What about him?"
Yeah, and he says, look, that's
Don't
none of your
worry
business.
about it.
Yeah, right. But I just love that image of the beloved disciple just, well, I know he's taking Peter off by himself, but I'll just follow along.
Yeah,
behind.
there's actually all sorts of wonderful details in John 21.
Yeah.
I personally like the account, and this ties into the topic of the show, because when Jesus is on the seashore there and he says, throw the net down and you're going to catch a bunch of fish, and they catch 153 fish is what we're told, right?
Right.
And then Peter dives in, he meets Jesus on the shore, and then Jesus says, "Hey, Peter, go get me some fish."
Yes, right.
And Jesus, I'm telling you, Jesus was a Cajun, man. He said, "I'm ready to cook us some fish, man."
But all that fish stuff has a double meaning, too. I mean, it starts with Peter saying, not anybody else saying, it starts with Peter saying, "I'm going fishing."
I'm going fishing.
And then everybody says,
follows.
"I'll go with you."
Yeah, you got to stick with Pete,
And
man.
then they all stay in the boat, but Peter jumps out of the
and
boat.
what's interesting, Si, is when Peter goes, John makes it a point that there are 153 fish in the net, and it's so full that the net didn't, even though it was so full, the net did not break.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, we're told that, Peter went and grabbed it by himself.
Oh, yeah,
And
right.
pulled it to the shore.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something that would have required multiple men to bring in. And then here's Peter with the 24-inch biceps. All right.
Yeah,
Supernatural.
right. Looking like Carlo Broussard out there.
I don't know. I lost to Jared Zimmer in the boxing match on Facebook and on social media. So I don't
really?
know. Jared
Zimmer's like a professional bodybuilder.
He's got some bigger biceps than me, but not as big as Peter, because he went and he brought in that net of 153 fish, which would have required more than one man in order to bring in. So it's just a little detail, which sort of, as
they all keep pointing in this
as my
direction.
colleague and friend Tim Staples points out, that's the context. That's sort of teeing it up. That's setting the stage for the threefold command to shepherd and feed Jesus' sheep. So little details like that are not superfluous. They have,
But
they
even though
contribute to the whole
Even
thing.
though he's making Peter Pope at that moment,
That's
he
right.
basically says, "Mind your own business." When he asks about somebody
Well,
else.
that's very similar to Matthew 16 when he gives him the keys of the kingdom, right?
Yeah.
And then right after he says, "I'm going to the cross," Peter says, boy, you ain't." And then Jesus says, Get
behind me, Satan.
Get
Yeah.
behind me, Satan.
Right. We'll be right back with more of the Bible Blueprint for the papacy with Carlo Broussard. 888-31-TRUTH is the number. Be right back after this.
Don't you just love listening to Carlo Broussard? Did you know you can book Carlo or any of our other great speakers to speak at your parish or special event? Contact one of our seminar coordinators through the Speakers Bureau section on Catholic.com today to find out more information.
God helps those who help themselves. Preach the gospel always. When necessary, use words. We all hear sayings like these, and we assume they come from the Bible, the saints, or famous Christian writers. Nobody can seem to place their origin, but by sheer repetition, they've acquired a halo of truth. In my new book, What the Saints Never Said, I look at over 40 of these well-known sayings and track them back to their original sources. You'll be surprised at what I found. Some are close to what was really said. Many were misattributed or twisted beyond their original meaning, and more than a few of these sayings were simply made up. I hope by setting the record straight, I can make you aware of the theological errors that can lead us away from the faith and offer you authentic quotes from Scripture, saints, and scholars that will draw you closer to our faith. Get your copy of What the Saints Never Said by calling 1-888-291-8000, by visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or by asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
It may be true for you, but not for me. How often have you heard this during a discussion with friends or family? Whether talking about faith, morality, politics, or just the basic notion of truth, so many people are captive to the notion of relativism, the belief that reality is something we decide. In his new audio presentation, Your Truth, My Truth, apologist Carlo Broussard breaks down this intellectual cancer, looking at the different kinds of relativism we regularly encounter and demonstrating how, ultimately, they collapse under the weight of their own incoherence. More importantly, Carlo makes a powerful case for the existence of objective truth, showing you how to explain to others that right and wrong are both real and universal, because it was designed that way by God. Order your copy of Your Truth, My Truth by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Happy Easter. We're here with Carlo Broussard this hour. We're discussing the Bible blueprint for the papacy. And already the line's starting to fill up, almost full, but there's one line open. So if you want to call, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. We go now to Leo in Anchorage, Alaska. We've been getting a lot of calls from Alaska. I guess they're thawing out up there this month. Leo, your question for Carlo.
Hi, guys. I'm surprised you took my call, but basically the long and short of it, I've got friends that have become Catholic, and they're doing their best to evangelize me. And I've been listening to the radio a lot, and the whole thing comes down for me, well, not the whole thing, but the question I have is about the Eucharist.
Yeah.
I understand it's seen as the body and blood, soul and divinity. I don't disagree with that, but I'm wondering that when Jesus actually broke the bread and gave the wine originally, it was bread and wine. It wasn't his blood or his body. It was symbolic then, so what makes it not symbolic now?
Okay, all right, Leo, I see where you're coming from. Well, I would respond, Leo, and simply challenge the assumption that the bread and wine was merely a symbol then at the Last Supper. I mean, because your argument would be a good argument if and only if the bread and wine were only bread and wine at the Last Supper, right? And it wasn't changed into Jesus' body and blood, well, then your argument would work, and then we would have no reason to think that it's more than a symbol today. So I would challenge the assumption and say that as Catholics, when we look at the text and throughout the 2,000 years of Christianity, that when Jesus took bread and he took wine and said the words of consecration, this is my body, this is my blood, that he actually, what we would say in theology and philosophy, substantially changed what the bread and wine is into the whatness of himself. But the miraculous element being preserving what appears to the senses. In philosophy, we call that the accidents. It's not what is essential or the substance of the thing, but the accidents, what appears to the senses. So to the senses, after the words of consecration, in our sensory apparatus, we sense bread and wine. But due to the words of Jesus Christ himself, this is my body, this is my blood, the reality is changed and becomes himself. So much so that, as St. Augustine said in the 4th century, Jesus held himself in his hands. And the reason why we as Catholics would believe and take Jesus literally in that circumstance is because we know from John chapter 6 in the Bread of Life discourse, when he gave the command to eat his flesh and drink his blood, we take him literally there, and he wasn't speaking only metaphorically. And then when we look at the Last Supper, given the solemnity of the moment, given the Old Testament precursors of the blood of the covenant, and the ratification ceremony of the Sinaitic covenant in Exodus 24, the flesh of the lamb and the Passover, and in light of all of these Old Testament precursors, we conclude that there is something more than those shadows of old at this new covenant ratification ceremony, namely the blood of the new covenant, Jesus' real and substantial blood. And rather than a flesh of a lamb, it's the real flesh of the true lamb, namely Jesus. This is why he says, take and eat, this is my body. And if it is really Jesus' body and blood then at the Last Supper, and he invested that power to change bread and wine into himself to the apostles, and those apostles in turn ordained other men, investing that same authority and power to them all the way down to the present day, where valid bishops who ordained valid priests have this same power that Christ gave the apostles to change bread and wine into himself, while what appears to the senses, namely the accidents, remain. So that's sort of the approach that we as Catholics would take in order to address your question and say, well, because it was literal in the upper room at the Last Supper, and that authority was given to the apostles and through apostolic succession to their succeeding bishops, that reality is made present to us today every time we go to Mass and the words of consecration are announced and you have a valid consecration, Jesus becomes present. So that's sort of the linear approach that we would take. What do you think of that, Leo?
That's a lot. I mean, I have a degree in theology, not from a Protestant school, so I'm like,
Sure.
That's kind of a lot to take in all at once.
Yeah. And of course,
I
Leo,
shouldn't have expected a short answer.
yeah, of course, Leo, that a lot of what I said would require substantiation. We would have to look in depth at the evidence and, ask questions, go back and forth through intellectual inquiry and interpretation of Jesus' words to give reasons for and against our interpretation. It would require more time, but that's sort of the sketch of how we would approach that issue in response to your question.
Yeah, I guess I can't. At first, when I thought of this can't be the first time somebody's mentioned this because you guys have been around a long time. So,
Right.
But it sort of was like I've been listening to the Catholic radio now for a couple of years, going, okay, this has and I'm particularly interested in the Eucharist because you Catholics make the claim that, every church makes the claim that we have Jesus.
Right.
But you guys make the claim that he's actually physically there and you can come and meet with him, which is the guarantee that no other church really gives, except if we get enough of you together that want him to be here, he'll show. Where the Catholic Church says if you come to adoration,
He's there.
he will be here in presence.
Yeah, and the one further nuance, Leo, is that not only do we believe Jesus is there, body, blood, soul, and divinity, in both his human and divine nature, but that the bread and wine, at least at the Mass, no longer exists. And the reason why I say that is because in adoration, Jesus is not present under the appearance of wine, right? So,
I see. Yes.
So that's why I said that. I don't want anybody to think, oh, was he denying the real presence in adoration? No, I'm not. The point being is that not only is Jesus present there in the Eucharist, Leo, but the bread, in case of adoration, but at the moment of consecration, the bread and the wine cease to exist. The substantial reality of bread and wine cease to exist, and only Jesus is present. So it's not like the Lutheran idea of consubstantiation, where Jesus is present alongside bread. No, at the words of consecration, bread and wine cease to exist, and Jesus becomes present. And to tie this into our topic side of the papacy, we know this to be infallibly true because not only has it been revealed to us by Christ, but it has been definitively interpreted by the successors of Peter, the popes, in definitively declaring for us the true meaning of Jesus' words in John chapter 6, eat my flesh and drink my blood, the true meaning of Jesus' words at the Last Supper, this is my body, this is my blood. Without the infallible teaching voice of Peter and his successors, Peter in his successors, you might say, right?
Yeah.
Well, then Leo's educated guess would be just as good as my educated guess. And we would give our educated interpretations back and forth, but we really wouldn't know definitively what is the authentic meaning of Jesus' words. And so we appeal to the authority of the church ultimately to settle the matter for us that this is what Jesus meant, because we have historical evidence that Jesus gave Peter this supreme binding and loosing role, which was carried over to his successors who would succeed him as the Bishop of Rome.
Leo, you got about 15 seconds for a response if you got any.
No, I appreciate your answer, and when I have to listen to this again, at least next time you broadcast, so I can pick up pick up what I missed.
Well, you
Thank
can you can always listen to it at Catholic.com. It'll be there Monday, I'm sure. Just on Fridays, you got to wait through the weekend. But it's always on Facebook, YouTube. It stays there. Carlo Broussard is our guest this hour. Leo, thanks very much for that call. Our topic, the Bible blueprint for the papacy. We're looking forward to some calls not from Alaska when we come back right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
Encounter with Dan Demete and Patrick Rice is our new radio show for young adults.
The Holy Spirit is about a new and exciting work in the young church of today. On Encounter, we bring young adults the life-changing testimonies of ordinary people that launch them into lives of extraordinary mission. Their testimonies bring faith and power into the lives of everyone who listens.
Encounter with Dan Demete and Patrick Rice. The Spiritual Awakening continues Saturday night, 8 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Catholic Answers is doing it again. We're holding our 5th annual Apologetics Conference this September in beautiful San Diego, California, and we'd like to see you there.
We've had a wonderful time going home all enthused.
Every time we come here, it's just an incredible experience.
Normally you'd have to root through a dozen different books to get half the stuff I've learned here.
These guys are so amazing. I always get so much, learn so much. I've already signed up for next year.
Join us this September 27th to the 30th for a lively and inspiring conference with an all-star lineup of speakers guaranteed to jumpstart your faith. All of your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and special keynote speaker Raymond Leo Cardinal Burke.
I enjoy the atmosphere and the friendliness of the people, and I'm having a great time.
I love it. I love it. I'm so glad I came here.
I've just learned so much. You know, I've been a Catholic all my life. It's just been so wonderful.
I love it. I want to come back every year.
Hi, this is Cy Kellett. It's easier than you may think to have a Catholic Answers speaker at your conference or parish event. We've got the speakers. Fired up and knowledgeable Catholic Answers speakers have their bags packed and are ready to come see you. Go to CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com to find out just how easy it is to have a Catholic Answers speaker at your next event. That's CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com. Carlo, get your feet off my suitcase. A blessed Holy Week to you as our most joyous time of the year continues. The Lord is risen, and we rejoice in that. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Our guest this hour is Carlo Broussard, and we're discussing the Bible blueprint for the papacy. If you have questions about finding the papacy in the Bible, give us a call, 888-318-7884. Earlier, when I introduced you, I said that you are a renowned speaker, Carlo. So but I forgot to ask you where you're taking your renowned speaking to coming up.
Yeah, well,
you're going out into the ocean, I know.
Yeah, I am. I am off in April, but in May I'm going to be doing a small cruise out of Long Beach with. You got it right there. I can't remember.
Heart of Mary and Acts Ministries.
That's it. It was slipping my mind. So it's a retreat at the sea. I want to start singing like that mermaid song, you know?
Oh yeah.
What's that song?
Under the Sea, though. You don't want to. You do not want to go on a cruise where the theme song is Under the Sea.
It goes to show you how much I pay attention to the cartoons, right? But yes, and then immediately after that, I get on the plane and I'll go to British Columbia in Canada to talk to some high school students over the course of a couple of days, doing a few talks in apologetics and stuff.
We got some Facebook folks who join us at least a few times a week from British Columbia, so maybe they'll come over and see you. Although it's probably really big, but
and then also too, I'm really excited about an event in May that I'll be doing. It's a 2-part lecture series or webinar with the Institute of Catholic Culture on May 15th and May 22nd on Answering Atheism, the 5 Ways of Aquinas, or Aquinas' 5 Proofs. I can't remember the subtitle, but the idea is specifically on the 5 ways of St. Thomas Aquinas as presented in the Summa Theologiae. So I'll be diving deep into the Sea of Aquinas. In that case, I'll be under the sea, right? Because we'll be going pretty deep in some good old metaphysics.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out what Thomas Aquinas is saying in the 5 ways.
Yeah.
And come up for breath every once in a while, right? But then dive deep again in order to have a very solid grasp of these 5 metaphysical demonstrations for God's existence. And so keep me in prayer because it's some fun but in-depth stuff, dealing with philosophy and whatnot.
CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com is where people can go to get you to be a speaker.
And all of the information is there.
They can go and get me as a speaker there too, but they don't. I can tell you that right now.
I don't know, man. You went to Louisiana a couple of weeks ago.
That was my favorite. I loved it in Louisiana too.
That's
it was
right.
great in Louisiana. 888-31-TRUTH is the number. I'm gonna read a couple of questions to you. And I'm gonna get to calls. The first one, the gentleman hung up. He couldn't stay on the line, but he was asking this: what does the book of Acts and 1 and 2 Peter tell us about the papacy? What can we learn from those?
Yeah, well, particularly, I can definitely respond to the book of Acts. I'd have to give it a little bit more thought about 1st and 2nd Peter. There's a couple of details in 1st and 2nd Peter where he's talking about he's writing from Babylon, which is a code word for Rome, which is sort of a biblical piece of evidence to suggest that Peter was in Rome, which some Protestants will try to deny and say Peter was never in Rome, right? So this whole Bishop of Rome thing doesn't make sense. But there is evidence in Peter's epistles that he was writing from Rome. So those are a couple of, one little detail there. But the book of Acts in particular is very profound. For the first 15 chapters, Peter is just all over the place, right? He initiates the decision-making process for replacing Judas in Acts chapter 1 with Matthias. He preaches the first sermon on the day of Pentecost, so the birthday of the church in Acts chapter 2, right? With 120 brethren there, and it's Peter who's out preaching and brings in 3,000 new converts. But the one text that's really powerful is Acts chapter 15, the Council of Jerusalem. We read at the beginning of the chapter that Paul and Barnabas couldn't settle the issue of whether or not a person needs to be circumcised to be saved. So what do? They follow Jesus' instruction. They take it to the church. Jesus' instruction found in Matthew 18, 15 through 17. So they go up to Jerusalem. They have a council where the presbyters and the apostles convene. And St. Luke tells us in Acts chapter 15, verse 6, there was no small debate, right? There was no small dissension. So this was a big issue.
Yeah.
Peter stands up among all of them, declares the matter that circumcision is not necessary to be saved. It's a matter of grace and faith. And in verse 12, the audience held their peace. They were silent. After much debate, Peter proclaims the truth. Everybody falls silent. And then James gets up and gives a pastoral opinion of how to deal with Gentile converts and keep the peace between the Gentile converts and Jewish Christians. And then, of course, the council would decide on those pastoral suggestions in Acts chapter 15, verse 28, claiming that the Holy Spirit was speaking to them. But we see Peter exercising the authority that Jesus gave him in the text I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, Matthew 16, 18 through 19, Luke 22, 29 through 32, John 21, 15 through 17. He declares the truth of the matter, and those present at the Council of Jerusalem recognize his authority by settling down after he proclaimed the truth. And even James, when he gets up to give his pastoral opinion, he recognizes Peter's authority in as much as he says, Simon hath declared, and the Greek word has the connotation of an official command.
Yeah.
So Simon hath declared, he has commanded, he gives his pastoral approach. But what's unique is that when Peter proclaimed the truth and he gave his message, there was no consultation on what Peter said. But when James gives his suggestions, the presbyters and the apostles have to talk about it, whether or not they're going to adopt his suggestions. So those present there at the council seem to recognize a distinct authority that Peter has that James doesn't, even though James was the bishop of the
local
Jerusalem
church.
church.
Jerusalem
Yes.
church, yeah, right. And Martin, that was Martin's call from Alabama,
Right.
and sorry Martin had to go, but we were very happy to share that question. This one comes from Facebook, from John on Facebook. How does Mr. Broussard suggest that we consider the papacy as distinct from any particular historical instance of the papacy? So, like, for example, that's from a longer question, but like. Even Pope John Paul, I think, talked about this, but we say that the papacy is established in the Bible, clearly, but does it have to look like it looks today in order to be the
question,
papacy?
Yes. And the answer to that question would be no. We see certain essential elements to the role of the papacy in the New Testament, with Peter being the supreme universal shepherd, having a supreme authority to bind and loose, the keeper of the keys, the visible foundation on which Christ builds his church here on earth, which makes him a visible source of unity, so that anybody who wants to be united to the church of Christ is united to Peter, right? These are all the essential elements of the ministry of the Bishop of Rome. Now, there are certain accidental elements, right? Certain things that sort of surround the essence of the papacy, these external things, how, what type of garments he wears, and sort of
even how he's elected, I suppose.
Even how he's elected. These things sort of surround the essential elements of the papacy that can change and vary over the course of history. And of course, the papacy today is not going to look the same to an appearance as what it did in the first century, because it's an organic thing, right? I mean, you don't say, the acorn, right? The acorn looks different than the oak tree, right?
Yeah.
The oak tree is there in seed form, essentially in the acorn. And then over time, it actualizes, right? And it grows and matures. I mean, even human development is the same way. I look a lot different than I did 36 years plus 9 months, right?
Yeah.
So the same principle applies to the papacy itself. The essentials are there in the New Testament, but as time goes over and Christians reflect upon the nature of the ministry, and and how dignified the ministry is. I mean, because this is a great gift that Christ has given us, and so there's going to be certain exterior trappings in order to sort of signify how important this role, this office, this ministry is.
Yeah, but sometimes too it goes the other way. I remember Paul VI. They used to carry the Pope around in this chair and thing, and then Paul VI said, "Nah, it's enough of that." And I think it was kind of, he was a very good and humble man, Pope Paul VI. But also, I think it's a historical thing. It's like that doesn't fit with the modern period anymore.
At certain times, those external trappings spoke a language. And it conveyed the message appropriately given the context of those historical circumstances. At different times in history, the language might get lost, right?
Yeah.
So we have to find other ways externally in order to convey the essence of what the papacy is in a language that our contemporaries are going to understand, but in no way to change
the essentials.
The essentials and the essence of what the papacy is.
888-31-TRUTH, the number. Carlo Broussard, our guest. We're talking the Bible blueprint for the papacy. We'll be right back and I will get to calls. Don't worry. It'll be all calls when we come back after this on Catholic Answers Live.
This is Bishop Robert Barron. You're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers is doing it again. We're holding our 5th annual Apologetics Conference this September in beautiful San Diego, California, and we'd like to see you there.
We've had a wonderful time going home all enthused.
Every time we come here, it's just an incredible experience.
Normally you'd have to root through a dozen different books to get half the stuff I've learned here.
These guys are so amazing. I always get so much, learn so much. I've already signed up for next year.
Join us this September 27th to the 30th for a lively and inspiring conference with an all-star lineup of speakers guaranteed to jumpstart your faith. All of your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and special keynote speaker Raymond Leo Cardinal Burke.
I enjoy the atmosphere and the friendliness of the people, and I'm having a great time.
I love it. I love it. I'm so glad I came here.
I've just learned so much. I've been a Catholic all my life. It's just been so wonderful.
I love it. I want to come back every year.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Tim Staples, Trent Horn, Cy Kellett, Chris Check, Carlo Broussard. Our on-fire lineup of speakers will inform and inspire your audience to grow in their Catholic faith. For more information on booking a Catholic Answers speaker for your event, visit CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com today.
A lot of people think that street evangelization involves yelling out of a bullhorn telling people that they're going to hell. Not so with St. Paul's Street Evangelization. Our methods are non-confrontational and effective. We simply offer information on the Catholic faith along with rosaries, miraculous medals, and prayer. Pope Francis wrote about how beautiful it is to see street preachers joyfully bringing Jesus to every corner of the earth. Street evangelization is fun and fruitful. Join us today at streetevangelization.com.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. So happy to have you with us on this joyous Easter week. This hour, we're with Carlo Broussard discussing the Bible blueprint for the papacy. Next hour, Everett Fritz will be here, who's doing some extraordinary things in ministry to young people. The art of forming young disciples. If you've got a young person in your family or someone who was recently, or maybe even not so recently, a young person, lots of great ideas from Everett Fritz on raising young disciples, not just young skeptics, which the world wants, but young disciples. That'll be next hour. 888-31-TRUTH, the number. We go now to Zachary in Fresno, California, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Zachary, thanks for downloading the app. You are on with Carlo.
Hello.
Hi, Zachary.
So I am recently converted from Protestantism.
Okay.
And because I've been a theology nerd for a long time, I'm kind of like the de facto Catholic apologist for a large amount of my friends.
Okay.
And I had a question from them when I told them that this was happening. On what scripture can we base a continuing Petrine supremacy, or
right?
Even if they acknowledge that Peter was first among the apostles, why should they acknowledge any successor of him being equally or supreme in the same way?
Right. Very good question. Okay, so first of all, I would challenge them and say, well, is there any evidence to suggest that the paradigm shifted or changed? And there is no evidence. When we look at the blueprint in the New Testament for early Christianity and the Christian church, Jesus invests Peter with this unique supreme authority to lead the church. That was the paradigm, that individual Christians would be shepherded by this universal and supreme shepherd, visible shepherd here on earth, St. Peter, who is doing so in union, of course, with the one shepherd, Jesus Christ, participating in that shepherding role. But nowhere do we find evidence that this paradigm shifted or changed. So at least, Zachary, we would have good reason to think that this paradigm would continue, whereby which all individual Christians would have this visible source of unity, like the first century Christians did. Now, the second response I would say would be, it's important, Zachary, we look at the keys of the kingdom. That's sort of the key, pun intended, right? To understanding the succession of the papal ministry, because I'm sure, Zachary, being the theology nerd that you admitted you are, you'll know that the keys of the kingdom alludes to the key of the house of David in Isaiah chapter 22, verses 15 through 22, which describes the chief royal steward in the Davidic kingdom, who had the key of the house of David as a symbol for his royal authority delegated to him from the king himself, one, second in command to no one except the king. And Jesus, being the true Davidic king, giving his keys of his kingdom to Peter, makes Peter the chief royal steward. Now, Zachary, that office in the Old Testament, that chief royal steward, it was an institutional office that had successors. When you look at Isaiah 22, there's a succession going on, because we're being told that there was a wicked prime minister, chief royal steward, Shebna, who's being replaced by Eliakim, son of Hilkiah. So we see succession in that chief royal steward office or ministry. And if Peter is the chief royal steward of the restored and transfigured Davidic kingdom, namely Jesus' church, well, then it would stand to reason biblically that this ministry of Peter would be succeeded by other men to keep on keeping the keys, so to speak. And then finally, Zachary, I would finish that response with the historical testimony of the early Christian writers, the early church fathers, that men did succeed Peter in the bishopric of Rome. And we see clearly right from the get-go, Clement of Rome in his letter talking about the successors of the apostles, him being one, namely the third successor to St. Peter as the Bishop of Rome, writing his letter to deal with matters in the Corinthian church, exercising authority. But then we have a definitive list, sort of the first time in history where we have this complete list up until the present day of successors to St. Peter in the Bishopric of Rome, in Irenaeus of Lyon, who's writing about AD 180 in his work against heresies. He gives a list of successors to Peter to his present day with, I think it was Eleuthерus at the time when he was writing. So we have, I think it numbered to be 12 successors to St. Peter, or it might have been 12 bishops of Rome. I'd have to go and do that research to get that detail. But we have the historical testimony, Zachary, that the paradigm of the first century church having this visible leader and a visible source of unity did continue. So that would be sort of the threefold approach that I would take in trying to address that issue.
Zachary?
Thank you very much. They'll probably actually end up just listening to what you said, because they just weren't able to be online right now. They had other things they're doing. So I figured I'd ask.
That's good.
Them,
Well, that's good. You could. Hey, we're really grateful if you're sharing Catholic Answers with others. We appreciate it, Zachary. Thanks very much. Happy Easter to you too. Let's go to Victoria in Owensboro, Kentucky, listening on WIMM. Victoria, you are on with Carlo Broussard.
Hi, guys. Thank you for taking my call. I am continuing dialogue with some Eastern Orthodox Christians, and one of the things that they have said to me is that the papacy is that it is a made-up institution, that it is a false sign of unity. And two of the questions that they asked me the other night, one of them was, if the papacy is real and truly a sign of unity, how do we explain the fact that there were popes throughout history who were even politically fighting other Catholics for land, for power?
Sure.
How was that a sign of unity amongst Christians when they were even fighting fellow Catholics?
Right.
And then the other question that they asked was to prove a point, is that they're saying, theoretically, when a pope does say something like there's no hell, theoretically, and I'm not saying that Pope Francis said that, I'm just saying theoretically, if a pope was to say something like there is no hell, how is that keeping doctrinal clarity for the world? How is that not a sign of confusion rather than of unity?
Okay, very good question. These are both very good questions, Victoria. Let's take the first first, right? Let's take the first question. We have to nuance our understanding of the papal ministry, because these two objections seem to reveal a couple of misunderstandings about the papacy. Regarding the first issue, we have to first ask, what is the papal ministry a sign of unity in, right? Is the papal ministry a sign of unity concerning politics and a sign of unity concerning what sorts of lands we're going to possess as Catholics? And the answer is no. The very focal point of the unity that Jesus wills for the papal ministry to be a source of is unity in truth. That's what Christ wills for the papal ministry primarily to be a unity in the truth. That truth about what we must believe to be saved, faith, and that truth about what we must do and avoid to be saved, morals. So unity in faith and morals is the primary role of the Pope in serving the truth of God's revelation given to us through his Son, Jesus Christ, the custodian and the guardian of that deposit of faith. And then, of course, the Pope is willed by God to be a source of unity when it comes to disciplinary matters as well, which falls under the command to bind and to loose. Disciplinary precepts. Now, there can be different disciplinary precepts, but ultimately the papal ministry, the role of the Pope, the successors to Peter, he does have this sort of universal jurisdiction in order to govern the people of God and the flock of God. Now, what this issue brings up, Si, is that sometimes the popes sin. Sometimes they're really bad sinners, and they mess up, and they cause scandal. But just because popes fail in their prudential matters, and fail in even living up to the Christian standard, in no way does it follow that they don't have the office that Jesus instituted with St. Peter that they are a successor of. Now, with regard to the second issue, this ties into the first, because remember, Victoria, the Pope is only guaranteed to be that source of unity, definitively speaking, when he is teaching something in a definitive manner. And what that means, basically, Victoria, is that he's proclaiming something to be true, whether it's faith or morals, that we all have to believe in order to be saved, right? So he's gonna proclaim it definitively and say, this is true, it can't change, and we got to believe it. Whatever format he does that in, that is the only time when he is guaranteed the charism of what we call infallibility, where the Holy Spirit will protect him in being that visible source of unity in the truth. Outside of those boundaries, right? Well, then the Pope can make mistakes, doctrinally speaking. Even in an encyclical, it's possible for a Pope to write something or teach something erroneous, on condition that he's not making it definitive as true and binding on the belief of all Christians. The charism of infallibility is not present. It's not there, right? So to address specifically, Victoria, what you brought up, a Pope could very well, in an interview, in an encyclical, in some sort of arm of his magisterium in a non-definitive way, make an erroneous judgment. And as Victoria stated, Si, Pope Francis did not do that, right?
Yeah.
I'm glad she brought that up and clarified that, but she was using it as an example. And so this is a good opportunity to reflect upon the boundaries in which papal infallibility is present and in which the Pope is guaranteed to speak the truth without error. So I'm very grateful for the call.
Victoria, thank you very, very much for the call. Carlo, we're going to have to go quick, but I want to try to get one more person in before we go.
Time just flew, Si.
I know. Let's. John in Philadelphia, listening to EWTN on Sirius Satellite Radio. I'm sorry that there's so little time, but can you phrase your question quickly so Carlo will have time to answer it? John?
Yes. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Your question, John?
Yes. Well, I don't know what to ask now because I am an Eastern Orthodox Christian, and she basically asked the same question I was going to ask. So I guess.
Well, you can give a review. What did you think of Carlo's answer?
I I liked it, but let me get a quick one out so you can
Okay.
go. I don't want to. I always make claims to, because the Protestants, never argument, just in love, always claim
Amen,
they were
brother.
idol worshipers and this and that. And we've been there 2,000 years, the Eastern and the Western Church
Sure.
since the beginning. And the thing is, what we learned, and this is where you can just speak and I'll get off the phone.
Okay.
We learned that if the papacy is from the beginning, we learned that this happened after like 500, 600, 700 years after, and that was one of the cause of our split in 10 something. If it's true that the papacy is real, why didn't it start from the beginning? Because we learned that it started like after, and that was one of the reasons that we split in 10 something.
Real quick, Carlo.
It wasn't like that.
Okay, all right, John. Here's how we would respond in short. It was present in the beginning, and we have historical evidence of that right after the time during the Apostolic Age in AD 90 with the letter of St. Clement to the Corinthian Church, as well as St. Ignatius of Antioch in AD 107, St. Irenaeus of Lyon in AD 180. We have evidence in the early church fathers that the successors to Peter as the Bishop of Rome were functioning as the Pope.
Man, you are good. You did that in 30 seconds. John, I'm so sorry that we had to make that so short, but I appreciate your call. Please call anytime. And especially in such a spirit of charity. That's always welcome here. Carlo Broussard, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Cy. Thank you.
CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com is where you can get Carlo as a speaker, and also his brand new book is available for pre-order at shop.catholic.com. When we come back, Everett Fritz will be here. We're going to talk about making young disciples right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. Call now with your question for today's guest. Toll free 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
Oh, you know you're having a good Easter week when you reach the peak at the very end of the week with Carla Broussard last hour and this hour, Everett Fritz. We are at a high point. And you're going to want to listen to this hour, I believe, because there is a kind of slow motion disaster going on in parishes and families around the Western world. Our young people are losing their faith or even in many cases failing to receive it. The numbers are probably way too depressing to talk about on a Friday. So instead of dwelling on that, we're going to talk about how we can begin to turn things around. How can we form young disciples for Christ, people who are willing and able to accept the gospel and to live it as adults? If you have questions or points you would like to make in that area, forming young disciples for Christ, 888-318-7884 is the number, 888-318-7884. Our guest this hour, as I said, is Everett Fritz. He's the best-selling author of one of the most sought-after Catholic speakers in the country. In 2016, he founded St. Andrew's Missionaries, an organization dedicated to training and equipping the Catholic Church and families in discipleship for young people. He's the author of the best-selling book Freedom, Battle Strategies for Conquering Temptation. And his newest book is The Art of Forming Young Disciples, Why Youth Ministries Aren't Working and What to Do About It. We're both holding it up for the camera. Everett Fritz, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me back. I'm excited to be back on the show.
It's very nice. It feels like it's been way too long, though. So this time, let's make an appointment after the show to have you on again.
Sounds great.
The book is beautiful, as all books are from Sophia Institute Press. They always do a great job, but far more than being beautiful on the outside, man, you really dig into it here. So let's just start with what's wrong. Why aren't youth ministries working?
Yeah, I mean, the title of the book is provocative because the subtitle says Why Youth Ministries Aren't Working and What to Do About It. And, I had a moment 6 or 7 years ago when I was sitting at my desk as a youth minister, and I had a very large youth ministry that I'd built from scratch. And I looked at a picture of a group of 100 teens that I'd taken to a big youth conference, and I counted in the picture and discovered that about 10 of them were still practicing their faith several years later. And all of these kids were participating in my youth ministry. And, at some point I came to realize numbers doesn't equal success, that participation doesn't equal success, that it's not enough to say, you've got the best formation, the best program, the best whatever in the country, or the best resources in the country. At some point, the question for me became like, what is the difference between making a lifelong disciple of Jesus Christ and what are the common denominators and what was actually working? And what I discovered is that those young people that I mentored in a smaller environment, one in which I mentored their prayer lives, we did Bible study, I dug into their lives, I knew their parents well and knew their families. They received most of the relational ministry time that I gave to my ministry. Those were the young people that became lifelong disciples of Jesus Christ. They had a mentor that walked with them and accompanied them in their life, which was more than simply putting on a weekly program in a parish setting. So they were receiving somebody to walk alongside of them. And I realized the reason why I had a 10% success rate of making lifelong disciples is that most of the teenagers in my youth ministry weren't receiving that kind of personalized attention. So what that translated into is I realized that I couldn't do it all on my own, and even the core team that I had built of volunteers wasn't necessarily digging into their lives. So we flipped the model of our youth ministry from a large group youth ministry to small group discipleship, where teenagers were meeting weekly in coffee shops and living rooms with mentors in their faith, and we saw just a huge transformation in that model of ministry and a huge transformation. And I talk about that throughout the book, The Art of Forming Young Disciples, kind of the revelation that I came to, the problems that I was seeing in typical youth ministries on a parish level, and then what I did in my own ministries to tackle those problems, and the instantaneous success that I saw when I flipped my model to small group discipleship.
888-31-TRUTH is the number if you'd like to talk with Everett Fritz. His brand new book, The Art of Forming Young Disciples, 888-318-7884, that number. Is this something that, so you come at it from the perspective of a youth minister who's, I'm guessing that your success was apparent. You have 100 people in your group there in that photo, and so I'm sure people were happy with your ministry, but you had a goal not just to make people happy, but to make disciples for Christ, and saw that it wasn't taking. Is this an Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was really troubled when I looked at that picture and actually started to evaluate based on the measure of success of, am I making lifelong disciples of Jesus Christ? Because those 10 that became lifelong disciples of Jesus Christ out of the 100 were are to this day phenomenal Catholics, vocation stories, are married with beautiful children. I mean, there's all kinds of beautiful success stories. And then there was this 90 that dropped off and stopped practicing their faith. And so it's like a Grand Canyon sized difference between success and failure, and very little in between. So I was really taken aback by that and had to evaluate, well, what did I do with those 10 that I didn't do with the other 90?
And where I wanted to go with that too is this an insight that parents can have as well? That do they have a mentoring role?
Yes, and that's one of the things I talk about throughout the book, is that one of the problems that we see in our culture, I call it in the problem the cultural problem. It's not just a parish problem, it's not just a Catholic education challenge, but a cultural problem is that our culture has largely removed adult mentorship from the lives of American teenagers, or Western civilization in general has removed the role of adults in guiding young people into adulthood. So if you look at the average schedule of an American teenager, they wake up in the morning, they go to school, they have extracurricular activities after school, they come home, sometimes there's a family dinner, sometimes there's not, they do 2 to 3 hours of homework, and then they go to bed. At what point during their day did they have a meaningful conversation with an adult? And I would say that this is a problem culturally. It's not exclusive to Catholic formation, but at a time period in young people's lives when they're supposed to be learning about adulthood, because their bodies are entering into adulthood, their hormones, their minds, they're starting to enter into adult situations where they're discerning careers and education choices, and they're facing peer pressure and all kinds of pressure with dating and relationships and sex and drugs and alcohol. At a time period when they're entering into adult situations, the very people in their life that are supposed to be guiding them through these things, that really know these situations inside and out because they've been through it, the culture has removed their influence in their life. And so the Art of Forming Young Disciples does spend a decent amount of time on the role of the parent and what a parent can do in terms of forming a young disciple of Jesus Christ. And in particular as well, pointing to really the idea of the parent as primary catechist and the family as the biggest indicator of success and failure in the life of an American or Western civilization young person.
888-318-7884, the number if you have questions about forming young disciples, helping young people not just get to catechism class or make sure they finish their confirmation preparation, but that they actually embrace the gospel of Jesus Christ and become his disciples. Everett Fritz is the guy to talk to, and we're happy to let you talk with him. 888-318-7884. The number. We'll be right back with more after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on. We'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live. God helps those who help themselves. Preach the gospel always. When necessary, use words. We all hear sayings like these, and we assume they come from the Bible, the saints, or famous Christian writers. Nobody can seem to place their origin, but by sheer repetition, they've acquired a halo of truth. In my new book, What the Saints Never Said, I look at over 40 of these well-known sayings and track them back to their original sources. You'll be surprised at what I found. Some are close to what was really said. Many were misattributed or twisted beyond their original meaning, and more than a few of these sayings were simply made up. I hope by setting the record straight, I can make you aware of the theological errors that can lead us away from the faith and offer you authentic quotes from Scripture, saints, and scholars that will draw you closer to our faith. Get your copy of What the Saints Never Said by calling 1-888-291-8000, by visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or by asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Interested in visiting Catholic Answers? If you live in or plan to visit beautiful Southern California, we'd love to have you come by for a tour. You can meet our apologists and staff, visit our chapel, and watch the broadcast of Catholic Answers Live. To arrange a tour, call us at 619-387-7200 or email us at visit@catholic.com.
Do you love sharing the gospel and want to learn to be more effective? Join the St. Paul Street Evangelization Online School of Evangelization. You will learn to build bridges of trust and make disciples by befriending strangers, proclaiming the gospel, inviting people to the church, and praying with others. We'll ask for a pledge of financial support, but if you are unable to give, we'll give you a membership at no cost. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Catholic Answers Live is brought to you in part by CatholicSingles.com, the website for Catholics who want to meet others who share their faith and values for faith, fellowship, and love. You can learn more at CatholicSingles.com. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicSingles.com for their generous support.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
There is not a conversation in the world I'd rather be having on a Friday afternoon than this one: how to help young people to become disciples of Christ. It's the most important question in the world, really. And Everett Fritz is a great guy to talk with about it, because he's not going to give us easy answers or answers that make us feel better. He's going to give us answers that help us make young disciples for Christ. If you would like to discuss that topic, 888-318-7884 is the number. Everett, a whole bunch of folks on the line. Shall we go to calls, or is there anything you wanted to say before we went to calls? No, you ready?
Let's go to calls.
All right. Christina in Mendocino County, California, listening to EWTN on Sirius XM Satellite Radio. You are on with Everett Fritz. Your question, please. Christina, do it. What did I do? I didn't do that?
We're off to a great start.
They're looking at me like I dropped. I did not drop that call. I pushed the right button. Call back, Christina, if I did drop the call, even though I know I didn't. Bob in Westerville, Ohio, listening on St. Gabriel Radio. Bob, I'm not going to drop you. Go ahead and ask your question for Everett Fritz.
Okay, Everett. Can you hear me?
We can, yeah.
Yeah, hi, Bob.
Okay. Ironically, I saw this this issue tackled on a cartoon called King of the Hill, and it was an episode called Reborn to be Wild, and it dealt with the issue of why these youth ministries fail. And basically and maybe you can agree or disagree or comment on this, but the rigid father saw the youth ministry as a violation of the fourth commandment, but yet the kid was so gung-ho, listening to Christian rock and learning about T.O.B. and that sort of thing. And at the end of the episode, the father takes the boy into the garage and pulls an old cardboard box off the shelf and pulls out a members-only jacket that was out of style, a pet rock that the kid didn't want to play with anymore. And he says, you may think that what you're doing right now is fun, but in a couple of years ago, you're going to think it's lame. And he says, I don't want the Lord to wind up in this box.
Wow.
Do you see that possibly, by using the different fads to promote the faith, that maybe it's going to be short-lived?
That's a great and an insightful question, coming from King of the Hill, which is that's an old cartoon. But yeah, I think That's one of the things I say about the nature of youth ministry. In some parishes, not in every parish, but I'm a believer that formation with young people should be fun. There's nothing wrong with having fun. In fact, fun is something that we should have in our faith. But there's something superficial about, I think, in some respects, large group youth ministry. What I love about small group discipleship youth ministry, which is what I do with young people, is that most of the fun we have revolves around conversations we have in the coffee shop. That's not to say that I don't go out bowling with them on occasion, or laser tagging or something of that nature, but or that we don't do some large fun activities from time to time. But if we use fun as the draw to get young people in the door, they become pretty wise to that tactic pretty quickly. What they're really looking for is, more than anything, is truth. They're attracted to holiness. Holiness is attractive. I always say that young people don't need to go to church to have fun. So if what we're trying to attract them with to get them in the door is fun, or silliness or games of that nature, at some point it gets pretty old pretty quick, because they don't need to go to church to have fun. They can have fun anywhere, at any time, any place. And when I think of places that I want to go to have fun, church is not at the top of my list. I mean, I don't think of the church as having that role in my life. Yeah, I think that there is a profound truth to that cartoon, basically saying he doesn't want the faith to become a fad, or become, the hippest, coolest, whatever the case may be. You can use those tactics to get kids in the door. It's not a bad evangelization technique, but once you get them in the door with some sort of fad or technique or whatever the case may be, you better have truth and holiness and authenticity and depth to what we're communicating, or they'll lose interest pretty quick.
Bob, what do you think of that?
I think that's very good, and I have shown that episode. It's called Reborn to Be Wild to youth ministers, and it gave them a lot of pause, and they came to the conclusions you did, and they often adjusted their approach accordingly.
That is, I'm so glad you brought. You know what? You have a talent for bringing pop culture into the conversation, apparently, Bob, in a very useful way. I think that's something that youth ministers need. I hope you don't want to be a radio host. Thanks for the call, Bob. I was looking in the book a little bit while you and Bob were talking, because there's a story in there where you're talking to another famous Catholic ministry person, and she says that she remembers youth ministry, and she has bad memories of it because every time
she said, "I hated youth group." That's what she said to me. I hated youth group.
You're a very blunt person.
Yeah.
Everett. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but the way I recall,
this book is worth reading. The Art of Forming Young Disciples. It's worth reading. I throw some grenades in there. So if you want a book that says what we're all thinking, the chapter 6 is called Catholic Education. It's a train wreck. I mean, that's a grenade in and of itself. I actually had somebody who read that and said, "I can't endorse this," because I asked them to give me an endorsement. They said, "I can't endorse this, not because I don't agree with it, but because I'm in charge of the superintendent of Catholic schools, and I feel like I would make an enemy in my diocese with that chapter." He says, "But you're dead on with it."
Well, what struck me about her comment, including the part about how she hated youth ministry as a young person, was like all the stuff, when all the bells and whistles would happen, all this entertaining stuff and the singing and the playing games and all that, and then they would get into small groups to have actual conversations, and there's no time for them. She said that was like her favorite part. She wanted to talk about God. She wanted to talk about these issues that are tough, and they allocate 5 minutes for it, and her favorite part would be over before anybody said anything of any import.
Right. Yeah. The young people, more than anything, what I've seen in youth ministries, they're looking for authentic relationships. If they want inauthentic relationships, they can go to social media, and that's something that has happened with regards to a shift in youth culture across the board. Is that young people I'm finding are less and less attracted to the large group gatherings where you do all kinds of different things, because if they want to be in a community of a large number of people, they now do that through social media. Whereas 10, 15 years ago, you'd actually have to go to a location to be in a room with a large number of people if you wanted to be with a large number of people.
Yeah.
But authentic relationships, where you can have one-on-one conversations or small numbers of conversations and get into deep relationships with one another, that's still very attractive and not something you can do over social media or other devices.
Everett Fritz is our guest. The Art of Forming Young Disciples is the book. 888-31-TRUTH is the number. And we go now. Oh, we're going to Christina, who hung up on me before in Mendocino, California, listening to EWTN on Sirius Radio. I don't know why you hung up, Christina, but you are on.
Thank you. I'm glad I got back on. I'm calling because I actually have four children, and 2 of them are in the high school age. And what I was looking for to get them, excited about being a Catholic and sharing the good news was to go on a mission trip. I think it would be so amazing and such a wonderful experience for our family. And I've been trying to look into, a Catholic organization that sponsors, some sort of mission trip. And I'm really having a hard time. And I'm wondering, what your thoughts are on that, if you think that would be a great idea, and if you have any suggestions on anywhere that we can look to get on a mission trip for this summer.
Oh, that's a great question. Young people this generation of young people are very attracted to service. So I think you're dead on with regards to looking for a mission trip. And just speaking to a larger audience, not just you, I mean, mission trips are very attractive for young people to communicate, get them outside of their world and their life and into service of others and things of that nature. I would recommend looking into Family Missions Company, which is a Catholic organization that's based in the southeast somewhere, but they do mission trips all over the world. One other organization, LifeTeen, actually has a mission base in Haiti, and I know that they do mission trips out to Haiti. And LifeTeen does tremendous work. So I would recommend their mission company or their missionary work as well. Gosh, I know that there are plenty out there. I wish I could give them all a shout out, but I don't know. I mean, Family Missions Company was the first thing that popped into mind, in particular because they focus in on whole families doing mission trips. So I would talk with them. And if they don't have what you're looking for, chances are they'll know who to direct you to. And again, it's a Catholic organization, which makes it that much better.
Okay, Christina?
Oh, thank you so much. I will look them up. Family Missions Company.
Yes.
When they get a little older, when they graduate from college, look at Christ in the City in Denver, Colorado.
I'm in Denver, out of Denver. So they're a tremendous organization as well.
Yeah, if you got a college graduate who might be open to doing a year of mission service, but also being very well formed as a Catholic, Christ in the City.
I actually have a couple of guys in my discipleship group who are graduating, and they're going to do a gap year with Christ in the City. So before going off to college.
Oh, you can go before you go to college. I didn't know that. Oh, okay. Very cool. Let's see. Renee in Omaha, Nebraska, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. I think, Renee, we're going to have to do one of those things where he'll probably start his answer this side of the break and have to finish it the other side. But go ahead with your question for Everett Fritz.
Hi, Dr. Fritz. Thank you so much. One of the things that I'm concerned about is that I've always noticed children, young people, need a challenge. And I heard that Islam is one of the fastest growing religions. And we all know that is a challenge, especially when you hear what they do for Ramadan. And I've noticed that people join the Marines to be one of the few, the proud. And when you look at Catholicism, it seems like all we've done is to make it easier and easier and easier, so that fasting, you do it 2 days out of the year, whereas, years ago we fasted frequently. Holidays, or holy days, we moved some of those to Sundays, so you don't have that anymore. And I'm wondering if you can concur with that from what you found with young children, or young people? Do they need a challenge?
I think young people are certainly attracted to a challenge. I know that, for example, my men's group, which is mostly guys in their 20s and 30s, in my men's group, they just this past Lent did Exodus 90. I don't know if you've heard of Exodus 90, but there's a considerable amount of asceticism that goes with it. So their Lent consisted of no eating between meals, fasting, bread and water fasting on Fridays, cold showers every day, no television, and no alcohol, and like a whole host of other things. Like I'm even forgetting some of the things, and that was what their Lent consisted of. I know in college, I tended to. I mean, I would walk around college campus on occasion in sandals or flip flops during the winter just to get penance out of it. I mean, there's something about deep asceticism. I think that is certainly attractive to young people, or just a devout Catholics in general. So yeah, if we water down some of the challenges of our faith, I think that it can be a contributing factor. Now, you mentioned Islam in terms of it being a.
You know what?
Are we going to break?
Everett, yeah, we got to go to break. And I don't want you to do Islam in 10 seconds. We'll do that when we come back. Renee, thanks for that call. We'll finish up the answer on the other side with Everett Fritz, the author of The Art of Forming Young Disciples, after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
Can you trust the basis of the Christian faith? The Christian faith is under constant attack today in numerous ways, but the attack that does the most damage is the one that asks a deceptively simple question. What if your faith is based on a myth? The skeptics come with arguments to cast doubt in numerous ways, often attacking the reliability of the New Testament and the Gospels. And the sad news is that most people don't know how to answer these charges. The good news is that there are answers to each and every one of them, good, solid answers. That's why Catholic Answers Studios has just released Jimmy Akin's new DVD, The Dawn of Christian History. With his characteristic wit and passion as a master storyteller, Jimmy takes you through an exciting detective story that reveals how history supports the Christian faith. Order your copy of The Dawn of Christian History today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
As the legend goes, the Protestant Reformation began when Martin Luther nailed a list of his grievances with the Catholic Church to the door of All Saints Church in Wittenberg, Germany. But do you know the whole story? In Catholic Answers' brand new documentary, The Protestant Revolution, you will hear from top apologists Tim Staples, Jimmy Akin, Carlo Broussard, Trent Horn, and Steve Weidenkopf as they expose the errors of Martin Luther and of the other so-called reformers. This DVD will give you a clearer understanding of our Protestant brothers and sisters, and you will be better equipped to engage them about what separates us and about what unites us. Order your copy of The Protestant Revolution today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting shop.catholic.com, or by asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
I come from the other side of the tracks, see? My uncle used to have slot machines. Put one nickel in and it's emptied. And I brought him home in a bag, and my mother looked at me. Where did you get all that money? I said, I won them. You didn't win them. He fixed the machine. I didn't care if he fixed the machine or not, you know?
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It is Friday of Easter week, and the joy continues. Everett Fritz is our guest. We're talking about forming young disciples, and on the line we have Renee in Omaha, Nebraska, listening on the wonderful Spirit Catholic Radio all across Nebraska there. And you had addressed the first part of her question. The second part of her question having to do with maybe a more rigorous presentation of the faith or a more challenging presentation of the faith to young people might be inspiring to them. Part of her question included a reference to Islam and the fact that Islam maybe is attractive for that reason.
Yeah, I would be really careful looking at other religions in terms of like what their success and what they do with regards to forming young people. I mean, one of the reasons why Islam is a fast-growing religion is that there are a lot of people who practice Islam and they have children, and they have lots of children. And then they don't have a high conversion rate, and there's some cultural issues with regards to that. So, it's not. I don't know that we could say that like Islam is beating us with regards to evangelization of young people. The Mormons actually are, again, another religion that's quickly growing because they have lots of children and their children don't leave the faith. I think we can learn something from them with regards to the fact that their children don't leave the faith. And it's because parents are the ones who do all of the formation of young people in the faith. They have two things that they built in. The parents do all the formation, and the parents know their faith really well. And the reason why the parents know their faith really well is they have to defend it door to door because they have a mission trip built in for 2 years. And every time you accept a Mormon missionary that comes to your door, you're actually helping them with regards to reinforcing their faith because they're defending their faith for 2 years. And so they get to a point where they articulate it really well. And then when they raise their own children, they articulate and know their faith really, really well. So there's something in that mechanism that's actually really interesting, is that parents are the biggest indicators of whether or not their children are going to be lifelong disciples of Jesus Christ and whether they're going to practice and they become the best examples of a living witness in their kids' lives.
How's that strike you, Renee?
That is very interesting, and it really brings out a point, too, that our Catholic families need to have mom and dad united on this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Renee, thanks very, very much. We are talking the art of forming young disciples with Everett Fritz. Next on the line is Zach in Charlotte, North Carolina, listening to EWTN on Sirius Satellite Radio. Zach, your question for Everett.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. It seems to me that dioceses or parishes that have either a bishop or pastor that promotes and teaches the full truth of the church and is more traditional minded, that they have a thriving population of young people, as well as an increase in vocations. So I just have two questions. One is there truth in that statement? And two, if so, what can the dioceses that are sinking learn off of the dioceses that are thriving?
When you say traditionally minded, what do you mean? Because that can mean a variety of things.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure I answer your question accurately.
Yeah, I was actually thinking more of the liturgy, and second of traditional meaning just, understanding the fullness of the church teaching. So teaching about the last four things and some of the harder truths, teaching that, at the pulpit.
Yeah, it's interesting. There, just a couple of weeks ago, I don't know if this was discussed on any of the Catholic Answers live shows, but the Vatican hosted a group of young people in the Vatican from all over the world. So they had 300 delegates, and the young people drafted a document that they wanted the Pope to hear from the young people of the world, and it's worth a read. It was actually very well put together by this group of young people. But one of the things that that has been articulated by young people to the Pope is that yes, there are young people. I should say this, because if you speak for young people, and there are all kinds of young people, and I don't want to speak for all of them. There are young people who are have left the church because of their misunderstanding or their struggle or challenge with church doctrine. But then there are a great number of young people as well who are attracted to the faith because of its strong teachings and because of its truth. I have yet in my career in ministry, and even dating back to my college years, I have yet to see a young person who's inspired by heresy or who's inspired by poor liturgy. There is, I think, every Catholic wants good liturgy. We might have some differences with regards to speaking to different generations of what constitutes good liturgy. I think I've seen young people become there's no doubt that young people have that parishes that are celebrate traditional Latin masses, for example, have a younger community, and young people. There's a certain number of young people that are attracted to that particular celebration of the liturgy. I don't go to traditional Latin masses, but I like a good liturgy. If there is a liturgical abuse or even just poor execution of elements of liturgy, I become very turned off by it and tend not to go back to those parishes if I'm visiting. If there is a poor articulation of teachings of the faith, I'm not attracted to it, and I'm still young enough to be like in the category of considered young people. So it is not enough to say, and I want to say this really, really clearly because there are listeners, and I see this all the time when I travel the country and give talks on youth ministry and different things. There are listeners and people who listen to talks that they believe all we need to do is restore proper catechesis to the church and young people will come back to us in droves. That's not true. All we need to do is restore great liturgy and great traditional worship and whatever, and people will come back in droves. That's not true. What young people are looking for more than anything is accompaniment, and they need people to walk alongside of them and be living witnesses of Jesus Christ. So young people are attracted to holiness above all else, and they need somebody in their life to show them, and that's what I articulate in this book, The Art of Forming Young Disciples. They need somebody to show them what it means to be a saint in the world today, and that's what they're attracted to more than anything. And our structures for communicating that have largely failed, which is why the book is titled Why Youth Ministries Aren't Working, because our structures in terms of communicating living witnesses are failing. But it makes sense, sorry this is a long answer, it makes sense that if young people are attracted to holiness, they're going to be attracted to good liturgy, strong teaching, etc. as part of that package. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Zach, thank you for that call. 888-318-7884 is the number to talk with Everett Fritz. And I appreciate you addressing that because we are in, various parishes are doing various things around liturgy, some renewing the extraordinary form of the liturgy and all that. And it struck me what you said about the personal witness of holiness. It's not just enough to be a holy person. It's not just enough to be close to young people. It's got to be holy people who are close to young people, showing them how it's done.
Right.
Let's go to Andrew in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, listening on Lamb Radio. Andrew, you are on with Everett Fritz. Your question, please.
Hi. So you kind of hit at this a little bit with the idea that parents are the first catechists, and it's really a lot of their responsibility. I'm the director of religious ed, and I have for a couple of years now. Noticed it's just very difficult to get parents engaged, even from the very start, to set up a parent meeting before classes begin in the fall, and to get parents together and to get them energized. Mostly it's just the teachers that show up. The parents just don't at all, and a lot of the parents don't go to church or to even try to get their kids to go consistently. So it's just, is there a way to engage the parents? I just think that is one of the biggest problems we face right now is a lack of parent involvement. And even in regards to what you were kind of just saying is holy people with close proximity to kids, I think it's hard to find people who are genuinely trying to live the faith and have a good relationship with Christ. I think there's just a lost generation or two in there, and I'm just having a hard time trying to figure out how to engage them.
Yeah, you and all of us. Everett?
Yeah. Well, yeah, Generation X, just in terms of like using some typical kind of catechetical terminology, Generation X is referred to as the uncatechized generation. Now, there was a generation, an entire generation, who are now forming the next generation of young people that was uncatechized and not inspired. I mean, it's not enough to do catechesis. We also have to do evangelization, discipleship, etc. So, and those are three different terms, which constitute three different things. the show is only an hour long. I mean, talking about how to re-engage parents into ministry and into the church is a long topic of discussion. And so I would actually say, if you have if you want really specific advice, approach me through my website, standrewmissionaries.org, and we can continue the conversation. But just something really practical, I would say that every movement in the church has always started small. That every movement and every program, everything that I've seen that is successful and has longevity, starts with small movements. Jesus started with 12. Now it grew to thousands and thousands of people, but it started with 12. And I have found the most success in terms of re-engaging parents and giving them really practical things. And this is, I have a strategy that I talk about in the Art of Forming Young Disciples book. But I do quite a few coffee chats with parents that I will actually identify a parent that I want to get re-engaged in the faith, or somebody that I think has potential, and I'll start asking them to come out and meet with me for coffee. And that becomes a larger discussion in terms of forming small groups with parents. But parents have a lot of needs. They're busier than any other demographic of people. Trying to get them to address their own pastoral needs can be really difficult. They will neglect their pastoral needs, but in a lot of cases, and even in cases where we see where parents drop their kids off at CCD, they don't go to mass, whatever, there is some acknowledgement on their part that their kids have pastoral needs, and they're trying to get them addressed. So they're not like entirely gone, even if they're not addressing their own pastoral needs. So the first engagement that I have with these parents, or point of entry, is to just go out to coffee with them and try to get them to talk about their own life and their own needs. And then I start to develop a ministerial plan based on those conversations. So I would that one-on-one invite to coffee is a huge ministerial tool that I use to re-engage people that are unengaged, and I would recommend taking that approach.
Thanks, Andrew. We do have to head to a break. I'm going to make a little pitch here in tandem with what you just said, because I won't deny any of what you just said, but there's local people in every diocese now in the United States either starting or have started a Catholic radio station. You should support them. If you want adults to come back to the faith, it is a miracle worker. That, and I'm not talking about supporting Catholic Answers now. I'm not begging for money. I'm saying your local Catholic radio station. And if you can put the bumper sticker, but not if you're a bad driver, all right, but if you're a reasonable driver, put the bumper sticker on your car. I have heard from hundreds of people who say, I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of people who say, I saw that bumper sticker and my life has completely changed because I started listening. People my age and in that range, they need to be re-catechized, and you can do so much for adults to return them to the Catholic faith. If you just support your local Catholic radio station and put the bumper sticker on your car, that's my advertisement. We'll be right back with more Everett Fritz, The Art of Forming Young Disciples, right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Have you ever dialogued with someone who espouses relativism, which says there is no truth, or it might be true for you, but not for me? It's pretty frustrating. Deep down, we know these claims are false, but we often don't know why. Here's the reason. To say there is no truth is a contradiction. The assertion is tantamount to saying it's true that there is no truth. Plain absurdity. Now, the other position, there is no absolute truth, just truth relative to the individual set of beliefs, is problematic as well. The usage of the verb is implies an assertion about the objective order of things. It's the same thing as saying it's absolutely true that there is no absolute truth, which of course is a contradiction. No matter how the relativist slices the pie, he ends up with a contradiction, making relativism an unreasonable worldview. I'm Carlo Broussard with a ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Did you know that Catholic Answers Live is on TV? What began as a monthly series on EWTN in April of 2017 is now going to be coming to you on a weekly basis. You can catch Catholic Answers Live TV Saturdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on EWTN, with an encore at 2:30 a.m. on Sundays. We'll also be available soon on Apple TV, Roku, and the Augustine Institute's multimedia platform, Form. Make a point of making Catholic Answers Live TV part of your weekly viewing, and we'll see you on the airwaves.
Hi, this is Trent Horn, and you've probably heard me explain Catholicism to non-Catholic callers on the radio or engage opponents in formal public debates. I've always hoped these interactions would show people how to graciously defend and share our faith. But they're not enough. That's why I've created a weekly podcast that will help Catholics answer the toughest objections against our faith. Every episode of the Council of Trent will provide listeners with a conversation roadmap that will help them share their faith with anyone. Keep in mind that I hate boring lectures. These podcasts will contain entertaining, informative, and practical explanations of the faith, as well as interviews with the best Catholic writers and speakers in the world today. Visit TrentHornPodcast.com today to find out how you can subscribe to my new podcast. That's TrentHornPodcast.com.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. We are joined by the irascible Everett Fritz. No, that's not. I don't think irascible is a compliment. Maybe I shouldn't have said that.
One of your
I gotta go
callers
look that.
called me.
Yeah.
One of your callers called me Dr. Fritz, which I took as a compliment because I'm not a doctor. But I have a master's, but I don't have a PhD.
But I like the sound of Dr. Fritz.
Yeah, it was a nice promotion there.
Maybe you should get your kids to start calling you that.
If I had a doctorate, my kids would refer to me as Dr. Fritz.
Yeah, you'd probably make everybody refer to you as Dr. Fritz. And Dr. Fritz's latest book is The Art of Forming Young Disciples: Why Youth Ministries Aren't Working and What to Do About It. We go now to Harry in Missouri, listening on KEXS. Harry, you are on with Dr. Fritz. Your question, please.
Oh, yes. Thanks for taking the call.
Happy to.
I'm in the car with my son Josh and my daughter Grace and my other son Matt.
Hi, Josh and Grace and Matt. Oh, sorry, I just had to say hi to him.
Hi.
Hi, guys.
Hello. We had a question about youth ministry in terms of retreats and when they have like different programs and parishes. Have you ever heard of Christ Renews His Parish?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
why is there not a program like that offered for youth? First of all, to get them involved in the faith, have a weekend of that nature, because it just seems that adults that go through that program, their lives are completely reformed and changed. The Holy Spirit comes in, and they're ready pretty much to get into some ministry work or groups in the church. Why are youth groups not created where they have programming like that or retreats like that? And then a second question is, when you finally have the youth groups, usually it's like different youth activities. Why do those not have more broken down committees or groups?
Oh, come on now.
For adults.
Now you're talking his language now. Go ahead, Everett Fritz.
Wait, what was the last part of that question? I missed that.
Okay, Harry, I'm sorry.
No, we were just wondering because say Christ Renews His Parish and then adults, and then they feed into all the different parish groups, and they build on that. But some of our youth groups are more geared towards youth activities or fun things outside. Should there be some way, or what are some ideas, I guess, you would have or share about could those youth groups be broken down into different committees or groups so that from this retreat or renewal program, kids could feed into those and then have more of an active role in their parish?
This is great because you're getting me an opportunity to plug my organization. So my nonprofit ministry, St. Andrew Missionaries, actually coaches parishes on how to develop a ministry like what you are articulating. So I work with Catholic institutions. So I'm working with a high school in Des Moines, Iowa, that they have a Kairos retreat, which is really successful in terms of an encounter experience with their young people. And then what they've developed this year is a ministry called Ut Fidem, and it's all about small discipleship groups that have started out of that retreat experience. And they meet weekly with their discipleship group leaders for Bible study, for ongoing formation in the faith. And they went from 0 to 120 students involved in this ministry this year, freely. It's voluntarily involved, and their ministry is really taking off and thriving. And they're starting to put together a pilgrimage to Colorado this year. I'm working with the Diocese of Fort Worth, Texas, on shifting their ministry to small discipleship group ministry. There are, I think, plenty of youth ministries around the country that do weekend retreats, that do, heck, I came up through Tech, which came out of the Cursil movement, which is similar in scope to the Christ Renews His Parish mindset. So Tech stood for Teens Encounter Christ, or To Encounter Christ, and was all about a weekend experience that then built out into ongoing youth ministry for the young people that would go through these retreats. So it does exist. Why more parishes don't implement that model, I don't know. One of the things I say in the book, Forming Young Disciples, and one of the reasons why I felt called to write this book, is because I see a lot of youth ministries that are stuck in a mindset that's not working. A mindset that is purely youth activities is not a youth ministry that's successful. It is something that came out of the 70s and 80s, recognizing that traditional classroom catechesis, young people weren't responding to it because it was, to be blunt, dull and boring. And so they tried to implement entertainment, and that basically the pendulum swung in the entirely different direction, where all they did was fun activities. And that type of youth ministry isn't forming young disciples either. So there are youth ministries around the country that are implementing what you are talking about. And sometimes what we see what I see in parishes is a lack of vision to really implement a process by which young people can enter into the faith, encounter Christ, be accompanied along the way by mentors in their faith, and then plug into ministry in the church or into the society so that they can form the next generation of disciples as well. That's really what we want to see from our youth ministries around the country.
Harry, it seems like you, as I was saying, it almost seemed like you were a plant. You were so right on the money for all that Everett does. Was that answer satisfying to you?
Yeah, but can I ask real quick? My wife is a junior high youth minister. Do you have that on a website laid out where they have that retreat and the discipleship groups?
I don't. I mean, what I do is I'll start with, so if you go to my website, standrewmissionaries.org, what I will do is basically start a consultation, set up a phone consultation, because what I found is that every youth ministry is different, and I didn't want to start a program. I wanted to give the concepts to people that so that they can develop what fits for their particular parishes, because I'm not a believer that one program fits every parish. So a Christ Renews His Parish retreat will work in a lot of parishes, but it won't work in every parish. So I didn't want to set up like one particular program. But I start with a phone consultation so that there's a person that you're working with, and then move to creating a strategic plan to help a parish implement.
Okay. Oh, that's great.
Harry, thanks. I'm going to move real quick, see if we can get one more answer in before we have to go. Heather in Alt, Colorado, listening on the EWTN app. I'm so sorry, Heather. Our time is very short. Real quick, your question for Everett Fritz.
Hi, Everett. Yes, I am looking for resources for parents on introducing younger children to some theological concepts. I have an 8-year-old that is asking some really good questions, and I can provide her some information, but some resources that would allow me to present it maybe at a level that would be appropriate for her.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, and I work primarily with junior high teenagers and young adults. So children's ministry, in terms of resources, gosh, that's a good question. Off the top of my head, well, two things off the top of my head. I would say that the best thing that you can do as a parent is be educated yourself. that one of the best indicators on how well you know the faith is whether or not you can teach it or explain it yourself. So I get a lot of practice from my own children who are ages 10, 7, and 5 in terms of articulating the faith and putting it on a level they can understand. And so I would say one of the best things you could do is be educated in the faith yourself. Now, in terms of children's ministry, that's the best resources. I could recommend resources that I know of, but I don't necessarily know of best resources. So I would say go to formed.org is a great resource, and of course Catholic Answers, which you're already familiar with because you're calling into the show.
Oh, I heard of them before. All right, Heather, thanks very, very much. Appreciate the call. Everett Fritz, the book is The Art of Forming Young Disciples, Why Youth Ministries Aren't Working and What to Do About It. That's from Sophia Institute Press. Everett, thanks for a very, very fine hour. Appreciate it. Always appreciate it when you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
We'll do it again sometime. We seem to be doing it once every time you write a book, but maybe we should get one in the middle there before you have to write the next book. Nick, thanks very much. Brandon, thanks very much. Darren, thanks very much. It has been a very blessed Easter week around here. A little invitation for you. If you went to Easter Mass last week, but you don't usually go to Mass, go this week. It's Divine Mercy Sunday, and it's a wonderful celebration. Jesus Christ is truly risen and is the light of the nations. And we'll see you next time on Catholic Answers Live.